Alright, so I've been debating on if I even wanted to do this. I had anticipated skating today, so I didn't get my makeup on or anything. But then I stayed in bed and was writing for like 3 hours because of a bunch of stuff that I was thinking through this morning. Got up, walked the dogs, was just gonna come over here and do a video, and I just feel like I look like a hot mess. And like when I was at home, like all I could see was the shadows under my eyes and everything, and it's like I decided to come and attempt the thing in spite of this. But this is what we have. So I don't know that I'll even post this. I'll see where it goes. Just because I've been thinking about doing it all day, and there was a lot of stuff that I was thinking about this morning that I felt like I kind of wanted to touch on. So one of the things that I was thinking about this morning, and that I wrote about, was, I mentioned a lot the idea of growing up with the conditioning that you're your father's property until you're your husband's property. That idea, right? Talk about that a whole lot because that was the belief that got me into the toxic marriage that I had a very hard time getting out of. And when I was thinking about it this morning, I was thinking about how, when I left my family in my hometown after getting married, it was relatively easy to change my name, right? And just say, I got married. There were, the one that's coming to mind because they're still annoying me is a collection agency that they had no problem changing my name in their system the first time. But when I went to change it after I got married, it was a big problem. And when they changed it after I got married, they put the wrong thing on it. So like what they have as my name was never my name at any point in time. And I tried getting that fixed multiple times, and telling them in the time frame after I got married and got my name changed through the thing, it's like, this is not my name. Fix it. And they couldn't do it, right? But then especially once I got divorced, they still couldn't fix it. And, there's been a lot of struggles with the things that I've had to try to change after the divorce as well. Because, there was one, I had to jump through all these hoops and fill out all sorts of forms for my student loan company, the one that for all my seminary loans. In 2019, after I got my name changed back, it was incredibly difficult to undo it, right? I jumped through all the hoops. I got it changed for 30 seconds, and then for whatever reason, everything went away. They put the old name back on there, and the documents that I had submitted and that I had jumped through all these hoops to submit weren't there anymore. But I remember very specifically all the effort that it took to try to get it switched around. And, right after I got my name changed, when I was still dealing with so much of the aftermath of the toxic marriage situation, I wanted to get it all done then, right? It was a big frustration point that I didn't get my my passport updated at that point in time, but it was I think $100 to renew that, and I've not had the money at any given point, or any sort of there's nowhere I'm going anytime soon, right? My $6 is not going to get me very far. So I'm not leaving the country anytime soon. So it hasn't been a pressing issue. But it's still something that just because it exists with the old name on it, it bothers me immensely. And I've kept thinking that, as soon as I have, just random $100 that I can throw on that, then maybe I'll look into it. But it's just not happened because there's been other stuff that's been more important. But it was relatively easy to get my name changed to the married name, right? But then the whole divorce process, luckily my license was easy enough, but obviously not without a whole lot of paperwork on that end as well. But still. Okay, so ever since I've been back, okay, like one of the things that came up pretty quick was before I got married, the name that I used for like my email and everything had my last name in it. I had, my initials and my last name, and then some numbers and other stuff. But then I was excited to simplify it a little bit by changing it to the married name when that was the time frame that I was in, right? Once I left my ex and was in the process of getting divorced, it's like one of the things I wanted to do immediately was get a new email address, one that didn't involve the name. But the idea of returning to something that had my old name on it kind of made me sick too, right? So that's like how this whole Mystic Fuchsia thing came together. That was literally me shopping around for something else to go by for my email or whatever else, and it was me trying to figure out anything. So like the Mystic came up because it was, because I'd had this thought years before that had seemed kind of mystical, and I had kind of had this idea of my belief system fitting that of, the mystical things, right? So my inclination to mysticism. So that was kind of like a start point, right? It's just, I don't want to go back to the old name. I don't want to go back to, and I'm definitely not going to the name that I'm trying to get detached from, and then it was just like the fuchsia part came in because it was like the top 10 favorite, no, it was like top 5 favorite colors and top 5 favorite plants. And it's like, okay, we'll roll with that one because I have nothing else, right? So I put my stuff together, and then every time like I've come up with anything, it's like, well, what am I going to do from here, right? So I went with that because I already had it and I was already connected to it. But that whole thing started because it's like I left the first name and that first way of being to go to the next name and the next way of being. But then when that ended badly, I didn't want to go to either one of them, right? I tried to get away from the one that I had acquired and and I didn't want to go back to the other one. Essentially, that point that I've mentioned many times where, I was conditioned with this belief that I belonged to my father until I belonged to my husband. And so for both of those groupings, for my for my email, it linked me to that possession space, right? So as far as I was concerned, I didn't want to go back to my original name because, for what it's worth, it's felt like my dad essentially just sold me to the wolves, right? It was like that was the thing. Since I needed either him or my brother to say, this is not the one, please do not do this, and they didn't, I felt stuck and like I had to go through with it. And of course there's a lot of reasons why on that end, and I've talked about many of them here, and I'm not going to go into all those this point in time. That's also part of the writing journey as well. But that was the overall thing that got me in those spaces, right? So trying to disconnect from the second chunk of my life and come up with something else to go to, I couldn't go back to the previous way of being because I wasn't that same person, right? And I had a whole different set of things that were keeping me from wanting to do that. But the big thing was, since my dad hated my ex the entire time we were together but never said anything, it felt like he just fed me to the wolves, right? Because that's just what it was. So part of what I've been thinking about today was, and I've mentioned this a lot of times on here too, I've talked a lot about how I grew up feeling like my father resented me. And I've talked a lot on here about that as well, like from the whole standpoint of, like, my brother and I have had this conversation. Well, there was apparently a woman that my dad dated that was in the military and went to Germany. And my dad had the opportunity to go with her. But because of his obligations, feeling like because he's the oldest child, the oldest of 6, he had to be available when my grandparents got of age that he had to take care of them. So rather than choosing to have his own life and his own existence, he let that connection go and ended up marrying our mom, who was, a kid. It was before they got married in November, just weeks before her 19th birthday, and weeks before she graduated midterm, right? Because she graduated in December that year. So, she could get married and have the life that she was, essentially prepared for. That was what she was raised to do. Like, all she was given hope and direction on doing was being a wife and being a parent. Those were her aspirations. So my father lets this other connection go because he feels bound to being available to take care of his parents in their older years, right? So he marries my mom. And, the next year, they have my brother, and then a couple years after that, they have me. So by the time my mom is 22, she's married and has 2 kids. And that resentment piece, because he basically settled for the life that he felt he was meant to live, rather than choosing the possibilities to go do something else, right? Because that was what he was conditioned to do. As the oldest, he believed he was supposed to be available to take care of his parents, and that was just it. That was the extent of the things, right? So he marries my mom because this fits the scenario where he will be available to be around and take care of his parents in their later years. And then because it's the thing you're supposed to do, right? They have a couple of kids. But when you're basically settling for a life that is not the one that you would necessarily, he did choose it in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it was due to the like energetic obligations, right? So for things that he probably wasn't cognizantly aware of, he made these decisions to have this life that he ends up resenting, right? And me being me and feeling everything, that was like one of those spaces of feeling like I was a burden, because for him, I was, right? Because I wasn't born out of love. I was born out of, he agreed to what the system had conditioned him with and went along with it, but it wasn't what he would want realistically otherwise. So obviously I have all sorts of feelings about all of these things, right? But okay, we're not going to there. The biggest thing that I've been thinking about today is that point of, because I wasn't born out of love, that's where I was the burden, right? So that's why I felt I had to marry my ex, even though I had picked one that was like intentionally like the worst possible option, because I needed either my dad or my brother to give me permission to release me from this conditioned burden, right? Since that didn't happen, went through with it, and all these years later, here I am back in this situation, trying to make sense of things, trying to heal from all the things that I accumulated over the years to have to heal from, making sense of the fact that part of the reason I felt like I had to go through with that marriage was just not to be a burden for my family anymore, right? Because that was the one thing that I was always very, very aware of, was his resentment, right? And part of that resentment was from the fact that, he was getting pulled into, like my band stuff. My mom jumped in on wanting to help with all the band stuff because she was living vicariously through me, because she didn't have her own life. She didn't have the opportunity to do those things. So since that was something I was into, she was into it too. But it was mainly to make it her thing. And my dad got pulled along into it, not because he wanted to. And, I know there's, the one dude that I talk about periodically, that was my, basically the backup when I was the section leader in those years. The one that I thought was an immensely better player, and he got all the the harder parts, because I didn't trust my own ability to handle some of the parts. I didn't want the instrument that was loud and bitey and chirpy at everything, and like the xylophone's so pitchy. So I never wanted to play that. But that's generally what the section leader, we kind of was like, it was the loud one, right? It was the one that was heard most easily. So that was usually where the leader was. But I didn't trust my ability, but I knew he was a really good player. So I deflected the duty of playing the xylophone off on this guy, right? Well, his dad used to joke a lot about how my dad was basically, they said he was like Eeyore, because like he was just so miserable everywhere he went. And yet he went, but it was very much, I fucking hate my life kind of an attitude. So, because he gets pulled along into this stuff, because my mom's trying to live vicariously through me, it's something I want to do. So she's, making it her thing, and then he gets drug along because he felt like he had to, right? Because that was that was what she was pulling him into. Right? So it's like all of the burden, the resentment, it's like I felt all of that. And so when it came to looking at the situation and, ending up getting married just so I'm not a burden to the family anymore, but that didn't work out well either. So what I was thinking about this morning was, like I've said on here a few times, it's like the biggest thing was when he had the opportunity to say something, he didn't. So essentially I felt like he fed me to the wolves. Because if you bring a child into the world that is not born of love, which there are many, I'd say the majority of people that come into this physical space are not born of love. They're born of just the bad ideas that have been perpetuated by like systems like the fucking church and government bullshit, the stuff we pick up in those ways, that inclination to feel like you have to get married young, and essentially marrying off kids to procreate because that's the purpose that they serve, right? That alone is the purpose of the female, as the church and government situations would account for. Make babies. And I'm immediately thinking of that one that I saw a clip of a while back that some dude was running his mouth about how it's really easy to be a woman. All you have to do is get married and, have kids, and your husband takes care of like everything, pays for everything, all this shit. It's like, you don't even have to learn, right? It's like it's a gift to be stupid, but it's like, that's not a gift at all. And like most women that I know actually are very smart, and like my mom, even like the thing with her that drives me nuts is she accepted that idea from her father, right? That he was the only one in the house with a brain, right? That they had to rely on him to do everything. They weren't capable of doing anything themselves, and so they had to basically feed his ego to make him feel like, he's something special, and they're too stupid to do anything without him. So like the connections aren't about actual, like it's not a partnership. It's acquiring property that ultimately you don't see the value in. And since okay, like in my case, since I didn't see my own value and I needed somebody else to release me from this burden of believing that that I was a burden, I married badly. But it was for that point of playing out the conditioning and seeing what things get people into these toxic marriages that they feel stuck in and can't get out of. And well, hell, religion's a big part of it. That, as I've said many times, when I got divorced from my ex, I divorced my entire belief system, because my entire belief system was the thing that got me there to begin with, and then that got me stuck, right? So what I was thinking today was, ultimately, I was my father's trash, right? And he just wanted to get rid of me, so he sends me off to the next person that also I'm nothing more than trash to them, right? So I end up trying do, right? Trying to jump through all the hoops to be acceptable, to have something or be something worthwhile in life, in the connection, right? So like, I have no problem believing that my ex absolutely could not have gotten custody of his son on his own. And while I am incredibly frustrated at the point that I had to help it go in his favor, I'm glad that I was able to help his brother, who was, his brother's one of the good guys, right? So as I've always talked about, I remember being in high school and having this very strong protective instinct of the good guys. And what that amounted to was the guys that are trying to do their own thing, trying to have their own lives and not hurt other people in the process. But it's like the whole system is mainly built on people bullying others into submission and hurting everybody in the process, right? So, so I end up in the situation where I've gone from being my father's trash to I am, then my husband's trash, because there was specific purposes that I was there for, but beyond that, he don't want me. He don't want anything to do with me. It was just a means to an end, right? Like, so the whole purpose of our connection was he needed help getting his custody of his son, and I was tired of feeling like a burden to my family. And at a time, because of my basic training experience where I didn't know jack shit about who I was, I end up the first date that I had with my ex. Okay, first off, it should never have gone to a date. The moment he sent me a message, my immediate thought was, not a chance. It's like all the red flags were there, right? But then I'm faced with this point of like all the conditioning and how I'm a burden to my family. And I find out from basic that I'm a lot stronger than I ever gave myself credit for, but I still don't know how to take that version of me and put it back in this existence, because I went National Guard, so I didn't go anywhere with the military. I went basic training, AIT, back home, and was drilling once a month and 2 weeks in the summer, sometimes 3. That was my requirement, right? Because I wanted to have this honorable thing that was also a big thing in my family, right? So my dad was in the National Guard, my brother was in the Air Force, my grandpa was in the Army, my mom's dad. And there's been a bunch of cousins and whatnot that have also had time in the military, right? And so it was this noble thing that I did, right? It was me still feeling like a burden, still feeling like trash as far as my father was concerned, and putting myself in this space of trying to do something worthwhile, to make something of myself, to have some sort of chance at having a worthwhile existence, right? Other than just being trash. So I find out I'm stronger than I thought I was, and then I go back to the existence where, gotta go back home, and home was home again. Right? Like every time there's been little glimpses, little opportunities of, or little tastes of getting away from that house, and yet something happens along the way and I have to go back to it for a time, right? So I was there from 4 until I graduated high school. And then I went to college, and I remember thinking, there is no fucking way I'm going to move back into the house. And yet, I had nowhere to go after college. The marriage situation hadn't figured itself out at that point in time. So back home was the only option, right? Because that was ultimately what I had thought the college experience was partly going to be for, was to find somebody and get married, right? And then that didn't happen, so I had to go back home. And, I had the guy that I dated for 4 years, and I worked most of that time at a group home, so I was using my degree to some extent. But then, I was totally convinced that I was going to marry that dude. And then we didn't, right? Then we broke up. And that job wasn't one that I was ever going to make enough that, I could go do my own thing and have my own existence. That job actually was kind of interesting, because when I got out of, so I graduated from undergrad, and then I went to the group home. Right, so this was like, I graduated in May, started the job in October. Worked there. I think when I hired in, because I didn't have any experience, I got like $11 an hour. And I quit because mental health is exhausting. After I'd been there for like a year, and I tried this insurance sales gig that was awful. I don't like, or especially back then, I did not like phones, and I've never been a salesperson, because as I've said many times, I am somebody that I can see both sides of the argument, and it's like, well, I understand what they're saying, but I also understand what they're saying. So I understand why insurance is important. But I also understand if you have other shit going on and the insurance doesn't come up as a priority, that they're probably not going to keep it, right? So if I just push until they get this thing, what are the odds it's going to, just slip off, and then then I didn't get a paycheck, right? And that happened. That was like one of my first big experiences was, okay, there was a sale, and I think you have to be at like 60% to get a paycheck. So I got a couple sales, then one fell off. And I was trying to get back up, but it took me to 50% because, one of two. But then it was like really hard to get the next one. And then of course, since I was, anxious because I'm not getting the paychecks because the situation is not, paying me jack shit, that poverty consciousness comes to mind, and then I get locked into this spinning my wheels and not able to do enough to get the next paycheck. And it ended up being a thing, like I only did it like 2 or 3 months, and I was like, yeah, this isn't gonna work. I can't do this. I'm not a salesperson at all. And that was the biggest thing. If I go into a situation and I can see this person's argument that they're not seeing the importance of the insurance, and yeah, that's supposed to be the sales pitch part, right? But I can also see what they're saying. So I can't make myself force them to, I can't push myself to make them get get the sale just for it to fall off. I don't want that. Because the more of those you have, the harder, or the more it lessens that percent, right? So 1 of 2 puts you to half, but if you have another one that falls off, then, you're now at 2 out of 3 fell off. And good luck trying to come back if that's like the thing, right? So it was a struggle. And it did not go over well, and eventually I quit and ended up back at the group home, right? So I left the group home in November, and then I went back in May. And I didn't go back to the same one, and I only went back part-time because it's like I was just in mental health for a year, and it was exhausting. How can I make this a full-time job knowing that it's literally just going to sap everything out of me, right? So I had to ease back into it. So I took the part-time job at the other location and loved it down there. And eventually I picked up a second part-time shift, which one was night shift, one was evening shift. So the evening shift, obviously I'm dealing more with the clients, but the night shift was more peaceful. Yes, I was still dealing with them, had to give them their meds, had to do bed checks, all that stuff, but it was mainly like worrying about the paperwork being up to date and, checking in meds when those came in and all that fun stuff. A lot of the office cleaning stuff, because the clients they had their chores through the week that they had to do. And then too, that was one of those things. It's like when okay, if it was, they always said if it was a Sarah and Steve weekend, it was a good weekend. But if it was a Julie weekend, they were going to be a lot more wound up with it, because that was the biggest thing was their lives were like revolved around the cleaning. It's like, fuck, I don't clean this much. It's like, okay, I've always been of the mind that I'm okay with dirt if it's my dirt. Like my bathroom needs cleaned again. It's been a couple months. But since it's just me that uses it, it doesn't gross me out quite as much. Because like I know if I end up in a bathroom that my dad's using, he's peeing all over the floor, all over the toilet seat and everything else, right? And, get the diapers that may or may not stay in the trash can and all that bullshit. But if it's me, I put my trash in the trash can every time. Sometimes, it's in the tub, so like I'll throw like Q-tips when I'm messing with my makeup, but they go in the trash can. Almost, I got pretty good aim when it comes to the that throwing my stuff away when I'm getting ready. But every now and then one will miss, and then I'll have to, grab it later, which is no big deal if I remember. And there's been like a couple times that one got away and I didn't realize it, and then next thing I know it's floating in the water in the tub. It's like, but usually I catch these things before, and it's just me using the space anyway, so I know what I've used the space for too. And if I've cleaned a bird cage, I'm much more motivated to clean all the tub related stuff before I need to use it, right? So I have a system. I know, since I'm the only person that uses that space, I know what I've done in there. I know how badly it needs cleaned, based on what I've had to do, right? So yeah, but like, to have clients in a group home and they're forced to do their chore every damn day, which, yeah, they're living with, 7 other people, but come on. There's got to be more to life than just cleaning the fucking bathroom or cleaning the fucking vacuuming the living room or whatever. It's like, to make that like the biggest thing every single time, it's like, that sucks. So it was better for me to not be trying to put myself in that space where I'm forcing them to clean all the time. And that's the whole point of them existing, is just to clean the space until they go out on their own and live with less people, and so there's less to clean up after. But there's just like all these little things. Anyway, I'm wandering again. But like the biggest thing was like that whole, and I'm trying to put myself in their shoes for one thing. Like, if I'm in that space, I know how I am. I know I need rest periodically, right? Like, the more wound up and stressed out I get over things, I sometimes need a whole lot of rest, because it is just like this really exhausting thing. But it's like the systems in place are set up to keep us from being able to do that, right? So anyway, going back to the trash piece. So it's like everything I've tried to do in my life, it's like I was limited on what I even thought myself or believed myself to have the capacity to do, because of how I'd been conditioned and how I grew up, right? So that ongoing theme of always feeling like a burden to everybody, that's shit. Oh, I know how I got there. Okay, so that was how I kept ending up back in that house, right? It was undergrad, and I did not want to move back in. But then once I got out of undergrad, things hadn't worked out, hadn't found anybody to marry or anything, then I moved back. Then I dated a guy for 4 years, thought I was going to marry him, but then it didn't get there, right? And fizzled out very badly. So then I got to kind of recover from that. So then it's, what's the next thing, right? So the next thing was, okay, well, I've thought about Army chaplaincy, so maybe I'll go in as a chaplain assistant and see if that's something I want to pursue, because I'll work with chaplains, so I can get to learn from them and their experience, right? And if that's something that would be a fit for me. Excuse me. And I found out very much that was not the case. I did not want to do that at all. So I did not. Also, because of where I was after basic training, I had to move back home. I end up, I guess, over eager on trying to find the next thing, which, since I had gone to basic training and AIT and then got back home, it's like, we gotta go back to that point of, we're still a burden to the family and we gotta find somebody to marry, basically, right? Like, this is the underlying thorn in the side that keeps me moving in some kind of direction, because I feel like a burden, and because I feel like trash to my father. I just got to get out of this situation and get somewhere else, right? So then I pick badly with the hope that either my dad or my brother will eliminate that feeling bound to this idea, because at that point it was marry somebody just to not be a burden anymore. So then I end up married. Well, in that time frame, so we were together, we had this rental house that was like 12 minutes away from both of our families. And so we could do the family things, right? And still have a place of our own and have something we were kind of building, right? But I was trash to him. and trying. It's like, that's the biggest thing. It's like I was always trying to be good enough, and nothing was getting me there, right? So yeah. So then he ends up taking a job that will move us to Alabama, but we'll send him to Germany first. But he's also had to go to Alabama for 2 months, month and a half to 2 months, I think, before he goes to Germany. Well, rather than paying rent on a place just for me, I moved back home. And so he's gone for, the time in Alabama, comes back briefly, and then goes overseas to Germany for job training for like five months, I think. So in that time, I was living with my parents again. And then I was also going to seminary, trying to do things to improve my opportunities, right? Like, that was the biggest thing. Like, it was my mom's biggest regret that she didn't get to go to or that she didn't go to college, so she was not going to allow me to have that same regret. So I got pushed into it when I didn't know jack shit about what I wanted to do or what I wanted from life, or that I even had any kind of options or anything. So I just went along with it because I had to do something. But then I cannot tell you how many jobs that I applied for that I got overqualified, underexperienced. It's like, cool. So it's like, how much did we fuck ourselves up because we had to go do this thing, but we have no experience with anything, and now we can't get the job. And it's like, there was all sorts of stuff that I was willing to do. Like, I ended up, when we moved to Alabama, I had a $9 job at Target and a $9 job at a daycare center. And the daycare center, that was a generous one because that wasn't what they started with, right? They didn't want to pay that much. But since I had my degree, they felt like they needed to give me more. Or that's, but it still wasn't very much. I remember I was working with this one girl, and it came up. I know you're not supposed to have the conversations with your coworkers about how much you're making, but she got upset because she was making like 8 something and I got like 9 something because I had a degree. It's like, yeah. And that was working with 1-year-olds. So, but then I was with my ex, and it was not a good situation. And when I tried to leave in December 2015, I had to come back home, right? Leave Alabama, come back up here. Then when I went back down, because I went back with this idea that it's like when I left, I knew it was, I didn't like him. I didn't like how he was treating me. I was trying to choose myself, and I was journaling a lot in that time frame. And that journaling thing has been like the biggest piece to keep me moving in a certain direction. And there have been times where I abandoned it completely. Like, I got rid of that journal after I went back because I knew that it had all the things that were reminding me why it wasn't a good situation. But then when I left, he was in my head telling me that I couldn't do anything without my family, and that was why I left. So then it's like, did I leave for me and because he's an asshole, or did I leave because my family's in my head and he's an asshole? And since I couldn't figure it out, I went back to him. And then a couple years later, was a little better when there was a house and there was a little more motivation to make things work. Except he was trying to turn me into the damn zookeeper that I didn't want to be either. Um, but we're wandering again. The biggest thing was, like, with all of those things that kept me feeling stuck and feeling bound to this old way of being, like, that's the biggest thing that I keep coming back to, is like, I went from being my father's trash because I was a burden to him, an obligation he had to take care of, and then I kept coming back. And I married my ex, who also thought of me as trash, and I tried jumping through all the hoops to be good enough to do the things that were needed. And like, the entire time I was working on his freaking custody case. Every single day he would come home from work and I would be working on stuff with this case, because that was my job at that point in time. He said, "What did you do today?" "Nothing." And then just start immediately, like everything that I was putting forth of my time and energy on sorting shit out for his custody case, I had to do it, but yet he didn't appreciate it, right? So it's like getting bullied as soon as he gets back home, right? So then this is the whole way of being. So then I get to a point where he was like, okay, I have bent over backwards trying to get the shit together to get the truth in front of a singular judge, and he's not appreciating any of it. So I left. But then I felt bad because he's in the middle of a custody case, and that's kind of, that's going to make it look bad too. That I spent all this time and effort on this custody case just to divorce his ass before it was even done, right? So I couldn't bring myself to do that because that's not who I am. It's like I had to at least see that part of it to completion. And again, my brother-in-law was one of the good guys. So, and the kid needed to see that he wasn't doomed to be a trash human just because both of his parents were. That's what it comes down to. And, so I left, but then I didn't leave completely. And he was stealing stuff out of my boxes and whatnot when he found I was leaving. So I didn't have everything together, right? So it's like a leak in my energy, essentially, where he figured out what I was doing and started stealing stuff and hiding it around the house. So it wasn't easy to get away. But seeing how everything played out in that situation showed me that I needed to have a job where I had money going to my own account. I needed my own bank account that he was unaware of, and I needed to be paying for a storage unit out of that account and putting my stuff there for safekeeping until it was time for me to be able to leave for real. And then once I was able to do, there was all sorts of other stuff that came up, and I'm not going there. That's not the point of this. But like one of the biggest things I was thinking about this morning, it's like this whole twin flame connection thing. Had I had the hope that there was this connection that might actually exist without everybody pulling on my energy, I wouldn't have been in any of the toxic connections that I ended up in. But because I kept getting pulled along into everybody else's bullshit and bad thinking and operating from a space of I don't know anything for myself, and like going back to that point where it was like my grandfather was supposed to be the only one with the brain in his head, right? So he would bully everybody else for not knowing, but yet not encouraging them to know things. Right? Like my mom in particular, she's the only one of her sisters that didn't go to college. I think the youngest sister went, but I don't think she finished it right away. But later she went back, and now she's a radiologist. But like with all that stuff, it's like it wasn't about bettering yourselves. It wasn't about being something better to offer or having something to offer the world. It was, you just expect that you're gonna have a shitty hand like your family was dealt, and you're just supposed to be okay with that. But it's like, that fucked me up in all the ways, right? And believing myself to be trash, right? So then it's like, I feel like what I was thinking about this morning was going back to either of the names, you know, the original name or the one that I married into. It's like, going back wasn't really an option, because it's like, it's like different phases of being somebody's trash. And fuck that. I don't want that. You know, I lived the way that existence set me up to do. I believed the things that I was supposed to believe, to have the experiences. But now that I know better, I am sure as shit not going back to that kind of crap, right? So it's like, okay, so like the twin flame connection, it's like, I've always had this hope deep down that there's this thing that might exist. But then, you know, with everything pulling at my energy, I didn't allow myself to maintain that hope. It's like everything in me was literally set up to suck the life and the hope out of me, right? Because if you can maintain that itty bitty little crumb of hope, then that makes room for the universe to line things up and start showing you a different story, right? We're creating something different now. It's like, I don't believe myself to be trash now. So even though there was an interaction with my father that took me very much right back to that space today, it was, I had spent my 3 hours writing, and a lot of it was about this whole point. And then I go out into the kitchen to grab something to eat, and he's sitting there with my mom watching something. And I commented on the video they were watching, because it's some bullshit that they watch a lot of these videos that are like stories about things happening. And like the story they had on, you know, there was some shit that it sounded, the little bit that I caught sounded like very pro Charlie Kirk shit, and opposed to his wife. But it sounded like it was this scripted thing that, you know, they're just listening to Story Hour, and these are the things they're being fed, right? But they're very much of that mindset that he's a martyr, right? And like, he was this great guy, and it's like, well, what it comes down to is he died the same means of what he was putting out into the world. And I don't feel bad about that, you know? So it's like, going back to dealing every interaction I have with my father these days, it's like, he's looking for a way in so he can pick at me and get to me and try to ruin any opportunity that I might have of having a better existence, because I'm choosing not to cater to his bullshit. I will not clean up after him because I'm the daughter and that's my sole purpose as far as he's concerned, right? When I have always been his trash, right? And he has always treated me as trash. So no, I don't fucking care if you like keel over tomorrow, right? It's like, I am tired of living a life shaped by other people bullying me into submission. And so I'm not going to go along with that. And I actually watched this, it was a Kino Tarot reading earlier, and she was talking about how essentially the events in my life are forcing me to be in this space now, right? I cannot leave this situation as, get me the fuck up out of here, I'm done. I have to disconnect in a way that sets up the next phase more favorably. Like, leaving just for the sake of getting the fuck up out of here isn't the option, because that pushes me into the next existence still carrying some of that icky energy from the family, because it's like something that I'm trying to run from, right? So it's like I'm very much it's like my whole life, every time I've had to go back to that space, it's because I cannot just walk away from it angrily. It's like I have to figure out how to set myself up favorably for a new existence, a new way of being in the world, and releasing the other without it being me running away from it, right? So it's like that's kind of an aggravating place to be from, or operating from, too. But here we are. But like that twin flame thing, it's like there's always been this deep seated hope, but it's like everything was trying to suck the life out of that hope, right? And I feel like that is exactly what this world is set up to do. Another part of what I was thinking about was, okay, so I've mentioned a lot of times on here the dream that I had where it was shortly after I married my ex. He was in this pool of like crystal clear water, and he was like picking up these big fat koi fish, and like he had one in each hand, and he's like, he was looking for the perfect match, right? So the appearances, they had to look just right, the ones that looked the best together. And then I figured I would get in the water to help him, but when I pick up a fish, it turns into a rabbit, and then suddenly we're surrounded by this like grassy area with rabbits everywhere, and the fish are gone. And so what I was, like, one of the levels of me understanding this dream that I've come to more recently was that we were not the same species, right? So today, it kind of expanded on that point, and it was, he's here to go along with the system and making the system continue in its path of the illusion. That doesn't work for me, right? So it's like I get in the water, and suddenly like all these fish that are like, like water has to do with like the subconscious or whatever, right? You see the iceberg, and there's like so much more of it that is in the water that you never see, but yet you just see this little bit, right? So he's operating in that space of the subconscious or unconscious, and just trying to keep up with the illusions. But then I go in, and it's like it completely changes, and suddenly we have like more sentient beings, right? Because I don't think fish really count as sentient beings. They exist to swim, they eat, they poop, they procreate, and that's pretty much the extent of their lives, right? And sometimes get eaten. But like bunnies, they're pretty low on they're very much prey creatures, but it's like more sentient beings. They have more feeling, right? It's like taking it to a new level of consciousness is how I was thinking of it this morning. So it's like the space he was operating from was very much this unconscious, and keeping things unconscious, just like my father and my grandfather, and like essentially the patriarchal structures that exist are to keep people from waking up, right? But that's specifically one of the things that I am here to do, is to help wake people up, right? And really speak to these kinds of feelings in a way that other people can connect to at some level. But anyway, I'm at an hour and 4 minutes, and I've talked a whole lot about this. I will probably continue on some of these points, since like this is nowhere near all of what I was writing about this morning. It's like this is what I'm making sense of to for the eventual actual writing project. This is me learning my way through it, navigating all these different levels of understanding it. So once I understand it inside and out, then I can speak to it more clearly and organize all these things in book form, right? Yeah, and I had this other thought too. It's like this, like on the twin flame end, it's like the journals that I have that I've been writing in. I'm on 18 now, right? And that's since January 2024, where I started focusing like my time and energy and, you know, making sense of this thing, right? And so I don't actually write a whole lot of thoughts every day, but I still force myself to write almost every day, right? So it's like, even if the only thing I write down is the cards that I pulled for the day because they meant something in that moment and I wanted to include them, but then I didn't have any thoughts about what to say about it otherwise, or I didn't know how to organize my thoughts in a certain direction at that point in time, you know, I still write. It's like the point of writing is to keep me doing the thing. I feel like these white it's like a weird optical illusion kind of thing. Anyway, what I was thinking about was like this whole, okay, like the idea of the counterpart connection and taking turns holding space for one another. So, right? So he has this existence where he, you know, has a life and has his own thing going, and we're connected, but I have to dive deeper into the emotional unpacking, right? I have to sort through some of this baggage. So in writing, it's like, this is a space where right now I'm writing about all of my experiences. One of these days, once, you know, we meet, then, you know, probably not immediately, but at some point he'll have access to reading them, right? So it's like, in this way, I'm pouring into this container that I will then offer to him to see, you know, the journey that I was on, and, you know, make God knows what other connections. But then I was also thinking, it's like, one of the part of it where I started thinking about it was when I turn them over to him for reading and whatever, if he so chooses to, right? It's like, I was thinking about, hey, if there's something like there's a particular vision that I mentioned at a certain point, if you could like put the date down as this is when this vision came in, or when I talked about this thing or this feeling, you know, it's like, if you could like do like a short list, right? Like a little table of contents kind of a thing where you're already reading it. So as you go through, if something stands out and you think to put the date next to it, or like a date separately, it's like that would help me to organize my thoughts around this thing, right? So then I'm thinking about how, you know, he's built this life for himself, and it's like, I'm trying to build this life for myself, right? But borrowing from the framework that I'm learning from the connection about like networking and, you know, like part of what I'm seeing from him building the frame with, you know, the sturdy existence that makes sense and also involves a lot of networking, and how I'm seeing the networking at like this other level that you don't get to just like see because that'd be too easy if like you could see the chords that connected everybody and all that stuff. Anyway, there was a whole lot to it. It was 3 hours of writing, and I'm at an hour and 9 minutes now, so I'm going to shut up, and I'll continue this tomorrow, and probably look better than this, I hope, because this is a hot mess, and like my face is breaking out and all that fun stuff. So anyways, as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time, see ya.